Hey, what's up you guys? It's Simon. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, as you can tell by the title, we are going to be reviewing 3 Adobe apps for the iPad Pro that, as far as I have seen, nobody is talking about. So the first thing I want to mention is that when I'm reviewing these drawing programs, I'm not going to be doing like the most beautiful illustrations ever because obviously we do have 3 programs to get through. For the most part, I'm just going to be doing a simple sketch demo and then trying to see if I can paint just like a really simple sphere so that you guys can get a feel for how sketching works, as well as if you can get like some nice rendered paintings out of each program. I'm also going to be doing a first impressions type thing and reviewing, I suppose, more like just talking about some of the brushes that are available for each program. So why don't we get into that? Okay, so getting into our first program for review, we have Adobe Sketchbook, which is actually, fun fact, one of the first drawing softwares I ever used. It came with my Wacom tablet when I was like 11 years old, and I did not like it very much then, but now let us see how I enjoy it as an adult. So, first impressions that I'm having are that it has a very nice interface. It's very easy to tell where everything is, although it is a tiny bit cluttered. If you're not someone like me though, who needs to have the tools open at all times so I can switch between them very frequently, if you push the rectangle in the upper right hand corner, it will hide all of the tools and give you more room to sketch. However, I like that although it is cluttered, it's very easy to tell where all of the brushes are, as well as the transform tool, the fill tool, warping tools, all of that. It was a little bit confusing for me to figure out how to change the brush size at first because I was a dingbat and I skipped the tutorial, but I did figure it out eventually. There are 2 little rectangles. It's a bit hard to see them because they're not opaque, but they are right next to the brushes, and you just sort of slide them up and down to change the size as well as the opacity, I believe. So, aside from the brush size changing, I wasn't really having any trouble finding anything else. Everything was very clearly labeled and it was really kind of impressive for me. So, sketching impressions. It was really fun to draw with. I really enjoyed the texture of the pencil that I was using, and I felt like it reacted well with the Apple Pencil as far as sizing and pen pressure goes. I noticed that similar to some other programs, when you use the Apple Pencil at an angle, it will change the sizing as well as be a little bit softer, similar to if you were holding a real pencil on its side. So I thought that was really, really cool. I also did notice a little bit of lag with the sketching, but it was something that was so minimal that eventually you get used to it and it doesn't really affect the drawing process. So, tool impressions. Good God, the transform tool. Oh my god, I love it so much. It is so easy to use. You guys know that I have used Medibang in the past, and not only did I have difficulty finding it, but once I did find it, I had a little bit of difficulty using it. Although, like I said, I know where it is now. I feel like it's more complicated than it needs to be, but the one in Adobe Sketch was very similar to most other drawing programs that I've used, and it was overall very, very comfortable. So I was really happy with that. I didn't really like that there was no eraser in the basic set of brushes, however. It was a very soft eraser. The angled one was a bit softer, but still had like pretty soft edges, which is good for painting, but in my opinion, very bad for sketching. A hard eraser can be found in some of the other brushes, which I tested off camera. So I'm going to be getting into the tool set impressions because they are a little bit different than the ones that come with the basic menu screen. I suppose you have to go click on it to find a set of different brushes. So I don't like too many of the brushes that are in Adobe Sketchbook, unfortunately. There were a few that I was impressed with. I'd say the basic set on its own has relatively good brushes and a range of different things, so you can get basic paintings and sketches done without having to dive into the other brushes. However, if you do decide to go scouring through the other brushes, The only ones I'd really recommend are the brushes you can find under, like I said before, the basic brushes, and then there is also the texture set, which has a lot of different cool brushes, including one that would be awesome for freckles, so I would recommend checking that out. Painting impressions, something I didn't really notice when I was sketching is that it picks up the side of your hand a lot, which was particularly annoying when trying to switch between brushes. All of these synthetic paint brushes are glorified smudge brushes, which I personally don't like to use for painting. I have been experimenting with it a bit, but I still don't particularly like them, so I wouldn't really recommend them. There are some good brushes if you take more of the Photoshop approach to painting as opposed to Paint Tool Sai. I'm used to Sai, so generally I only need about 2 or 3 colors because Sai does all the blendings and in-betweens for you, but I've noticed apart from Medibang, with most apps you have to do more of like an eyedropper, continuous select sort of situation to blend, if that makes any sort of sense. I was able to get a good blend, and I think it would be fine for a more refined sit-down painting if you mess around with the brushes for a while and find something that you're comfortable with. Overall, I'd say I'd give Adobe Sketch a 6 out of 10 because it was easy to use, there were no ads from what I can see, and it's free. Points were docked purely because there's a ton of brushes, but I don't like a lot of those brushes, and they're just personally not nice to use for me. I also had to dock some points because of the fact that it picks up the side of my hand, and if you're working on an iPad, that gets annoying very quickly, and unlike Procreate, there's no option to turn that off. So that was very frustrating, but everything else was very easy and pleasant and relaxing to use. So, getting into our next program, first impressions for Adobe Draw are that it is god-awful. It is so bad. I absolutely hated the initial sketch process. It was hard for no reason. I couldn't do small details, particularly I was noticing in the corner of the mouth and the pupils and also the nostrils. It kept activating some sort of fill or like anti-fill bucket. You can sort of see it in the right eye, and some point during the speed paint it just fills with the color because I was trying to draw the pupil, and that was very, very frustrating for me. There was also a ton of lag that, unlike Adobe Sketchbook, it was very noticeable. It was almost like the pen didn't line up properly with what I was drawing, so that was definitely very annoying. You can see a lot of different times where I try to switch between brushes, or where I sketched like a mini nose because I was having so much difficulty drawing the nose because of the lag. I was like, it's gotta be there's no way this is how it is. So I tried to sketch the nose again, and it just was bad. It was bad, and it continued to be bad. Another bad thing, there are five brushes. 5. You can change the taper, the opacity, the size, the roundness, and the angle. And that's it. So already right off the bat, I knew that painting was going to be very difficult because upon testing out all of these brushes, none of these really seemed to look like they were going to blend under any circumstances. So, difficult painting was clearly an understatement, because you can see that I quite quickly gave up. The entire experience of using this program was awful. I couldn't even get through my second refined sketch because the lines were so messy. I also noticed that none of the brushes could go over 60 pixels, including the eraser, so if you're sketching something big, good luck erasing, because it will be a pain. As for painting, it is literally impossible. The app obviously doesn't claim to be a painting app. It's clearly called Adobe Draw, but the fact that I didn't even have the option to paint if I wanted to was very frustrating. Also, for an app that's called Adobe Draw, it's pretty strange that there's not even a pencil. There's also no lasso tool or an eyedropper tool. So overall, I'd give Adobe Draw a solid 0 out of 10. A hard 0, because their brush selection is minimal, I couldn't paint, the fact that it's called Adobe Draw and I didn't even enjoy drawing with it nets it a very hard 0 from me. I'd want to say I'll give it a 1 out of 10 because it's free, but there are considerably better drawing apps out there that are also free. Don't even try to download. You should stay very, very far away from it, but you know what you shouldn't stay very far away from? The subscribe button. We're super close to 1K subs, and when I get there, I'm going to be doing some sort of celebration / giveaway type thing, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be a part of that when we get there. Now, back to the reviews. So our final competitor, I suppose we could say, for tonight's Adobe Showdown is Adobe Photoshop Sketch. So, first impressions is that the layout is terrifyingly similar to the monster that was Adobe Draw, but I can clearly see brushes that maybe, potentially, could be used for painting, and true to name, a pencil that might allow me to sketch more comfortably, which was a correct assumption. I noticed that sketching in this program was a lot more comfortable than with Adobe Draw. I didn't have any of the issues that I had making small details in this program. I did, however, notice that for some reason I had more issues with like the motions, if that makes sense, like zooming in and out of the canvas. It would sometimes pick up my finger and draw with it rather than turning the canvas, which was a little bit frustrating. As for the brushes, like Adobe Draw, there aren't that many that you can really use. Again, you only have a choice between 5 brushes that let you change the same properties, but it also does include something called flow, which as a non-Photoshop user, I don't know what flow is or does, but I do know that it is something that you can change in Photoshop, so I'm assuming it does something good. However, apart from that, I did notice that the brushes they did have were infinitely more pleasant to use, particularly the pencil. I loved sketching with it. I didn't have any messy line work despite using my pencil the exact same way that I would sketch with any other program. It just was particularly bad with Adobe Draw for some reason. But yeah, again, despite their similar to Adobe Draw being no color picker, I tried my best to use my eyes to see the colors, I guess, and managed to get something that did somewhat look like a blended circle. So although that was frustrating, I do feel like it's considerably better than not being able to blend at all. Also, something I forgot to mention with Adobe Draw that is also present with Adobe Photoshop Sketch is that there's no opacity lock on your layer. They do, from what I can tell, in both programs have layer modes, so you can attempt to use a clipping mask, but it would be easier if you could just lock your intended layer rather than having to create an entirely new one. A few of the brushes in this program did seem sort of gimmicky, like the 2 that are meant to mimic like a thick sort of paint. I don't see how anyone could really render anything with a brush like that unless that's the look you're going for, but if you're going for a smooth render, this ain't it. I also did have a bit of fun messing with the watercolor brush because there is a slight animation that almost makes it look like it's spreading across a piece of paper or something to that effect. It's not incredibly useful, I would say, but I can see it working to some extent, and it was also pretty fun to watch. Overall, I think I'd give Adobe Photoshop Sketch probably a 4 out of 10. It is a free program, yeah, but there are better free programs, and it's missing a lot of features that most digital artists are used to that would make the illustration process a bit easier. I do think that it's fine for a free program. The brushes, while there aren't many, are okay, significantly better than Adobe Draw. And I also noticed that you're able to make the brushes, including the eraser, much larger than on Adobe Draw, which is a plus. But overall, I'd say you're better off checking out another program. So that is it for this Adobe Showdown, you guys. I hope you enjoyed watching me struggle through some of these interesting programs. It was a lot of fun messing with them, even if some of them Adobe Draw were a nightmare to work through. Let me know, are there any other drawing apps that you guys want to see me review, or perhaps if you'd like to see me give one of these a second chance. Please not Adobe Draw. Please not Adobe Draw. Let me know in the comments below. Speaking of below, you'll also find the subscribe button and the description box with all my other social media down there, so be sure to subscribe and check out the links where you can find stuff like my Instagram, where I post every other day, or my Patreon, where you can be listed with a bunch of super awesome people like Elise Thompson and earn tons of cool prizes like early video releases, wallpapers, free coloring pages, and more stuff to come. Thank you guys, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye!